lecturer, an eminent person, Mr. Mayukh Datta. He is the national head, Mirae Assets, and he has got about 22 years of rich experience, and he is going to come and share his knowledge and words of wisdom with us. So without any delay, Mr. Mayukh Datta, please, over to you, Mr. Mayukh Datta. Thank you.
So good afternoon to everybody who is logged into this session from IFA Galaxy. My name is Mayukh Datta and take care for the MFD Relationships All India. Thank you so much for giving us the time and the opportunity to come and address all our partners who are a member of IFA Galaxy. So thank you so much. We wish all of you are healthy, fine at your respective places and taking care of yourselves and family. When we talked about for this session, as we were given this interesting and broad topic of conviction, collaboration, and consolidation as the theme for IFA Galaxy, what we had today within this 20 minutes was to not talk about any conclusions, but to keep in front of you some conversations, some line of thoughts. As you can see on your slide, some of the things which I'll try to touch upon during this session. What has been, go back into a little bit of past immediate history of how categorization and therefore since then what has been the impact, how SIPs has become such a large part of our conversation, but can we conclude on that? Some of the other things which are happening on the industry, some data for you to look at it, and some practices which in our job we get to meet distributors across India. Yes, give some examples of how other people are approaching the business. So if you look at it, the first change, if we go back in the past 3-4 years, which has been the most significant change has created, was when in October 2017, the first categorization document was released by SEBI, and which then put 34 scheme categories between debt, equity, hybrid, retirement, children solution, and so forth. 34 categories were made available, which then ensured that fund houses were limited on their product basket to these specific products. Yes, you could do a couple of more variations under that, but broadly you would say that there were 34 categories given, which actually then led to the product innovation being limited, but it also created solution and convenience for you and for the investor, because not each AMC would be running different multi-caps and so on. So the product innovation actually started with ETFs, with passive products, with FOF or asset allocation products. So the limitation on the active side actually started the rise of the other side, which is on product design on the passive side. This also compounded the next problem which started coming in, which is the curious case of missing alpha in large cap funds. As you can see, in the first decade of this century, the large cap on an average, the first 10 years on an average, alpha was about 6.6%, which came down to literally flat from 2011 to 20. So in the last 10 years, on an average, alpha has come down negative, and naturally when alpha becomes negative, all the discussions about such funds have started coming into the fore, which you can see for yourself. That's the common thread of discussion nowadays, what's happening in large cap funds. Similarly, the alpha in the top quartile large cap funds is also reduced. While the last slide talked about the category, this one talks about the upper quartile, the top quartile performing large cap funds. Even their outperformance has also started coming down. If you see, first 10 years, it was about 12.8%, and now it has come down to 2.5%. And it is a fact that as over a period of time, when alpha starts reducing, cost discussions surface up. So that's what has been going on for some time right now, as you can see for yourself. At the same time, during this period, if you look at it, this is how the SIP numbers have started going up. This is the top 30 distributors of India when it comes to SIP sales. So out of 8,000 crores of monthly SIP book, 4,000 crores breakup is available in front of you. And when you look at this data, look at how the data actually started changing. Out of today, 8,000 crores, 4,100 crores in front of you. Out of that, in the regular code is about close to about 2,800 crores, and the direct part, which was not there about 3 to 4 years back, even that has become now 1,300 crores of SIP book in the top half of this SIP book. So 67% of the SIPs are coming in regular, 68% is coming in the amount side, but 33% has started growing on the direct side. So what it tells you is that if you collate this against all the SIP communication which has been sent out by AMCs, by the industry, by AMFI, SIP Sahi Hai campaign, and so on, you can see that the SIP commoditization of SIP has started happening. While the SIP book has been growing, the growth rate has been slower because the base is also going up. But the commoditization of SIP is actually increasing over a period of time, and that is where the DIY investor is getting it. So there is immense work which has been done on getting SIPs accepted by the investment community, and that has been led by the distribution community. But what about the future? Just doing an SIP, is that enough? If it is that easy to do an SIP, would an investor would want to become do it yourself, or would he like to have somebody handhold him during the life of the investment? And that is where the value add on SIPs come in. Goal SIPs, commit to the SIP and not the asset class or the scheme. That is also another important factor. Even asset allocation through SIPs. DIY investor would tend to go after the best performing schemes, while somebody who is managing the overall portfolio will do an asset allocation even on the SIP side. There is another segment which is important, that why we have always talked about SIP only on equity. Because the underlying investment universe of India is still saving, not necessarily investing. What you see below you is a graph from the RBI report on savings. If you look at it, 2018-19, India was saving almost 13.7%. In 2019-20, it went to 16.8%. COVID hit in the first quarter of 2020-21. Immediately, savings went up to almost 8.2%. So this is this is how the growth on the savings has happened, but that saving does not come into the mutual fund space, because mutual fund by themselves from SIP, they would consider only equity, or their risk assets or their risk allocation will come into SIPs, not the other ones. So another important factor for us to think about. When we talk about SIPs, this is how we talk about it. Does SIP mean only one-way movement on the equity side? And this is, everybody knows which chart is this. This is the Nifty chart, and you can think about it. For the last 20-25 years, or the last 10-15 years, we've been talking about SIP returns, showcasing this growth in India. While we have been doing this, have we lost out on a significant space where investors could have made money? And this is the 10-year GSEC over the last 10 years. Even 10-year GSECs have come down by 300 basis points. It has been volatile, as the graph so indicates. And when there is an asset class which is volatile, it immediately merits a space and a discussion to have SIPs on the debt side. So it is not that only India has grown on the equity side. If interest rates have come down and equity returns have therefore grown up, even interest rates coming down has created a huge merit and huge opportunity and demand for money on the debt side on SIPs. So any asset class being volatile, it doesn't matter whether it's equity, debt, or gold, or whatever. If it is volatile, it merits a case for investment through the SIP side. And is this not possible? Yes, it is possible. Look at the last 40 years of 10-year GSEC moving in the US. Today, we are talking about 1.3, 1.5, and so on. But if you look at it over a period of time, if you held for 20, 30 years, this is an indicative but a great story to talk about why we should have long-term debt in our portfolios. Look at the variation. Imagine holding this sort of having a hold to maturity on a 20, 30-year debt product, even in US. This is how the yields move. So have we concluded on the SIP business? This is how normally we have been talking about on our SIP discussions, that why do you do an SIP? We do an SIP because we are looking at all these goals in life. We are talking about all long-term goals: child education, marriage, new business, a car, a bigger, better lifestyle, a retirement, or medical requirement, and so on. But are these the only goals in our life? Are these the only long-term goals which should be covered by an SIP? Are these also not goals? Today, a normal phone for anybody who wants to change is roughly about 60, 70,000 plus for a branded aspirational phone. Is it not a goal to have enough money ready with us for emergency funds as it has showcased in 2020? Do not even we have our money which needs to be paid every year for our school fees, for our PPF contribution, for our medical, car, life insurance, or our annual expenses or festival expenses. So life is actually a summation of even long-term goals and short-term goals. And even short-term goals and small goals, once it is achieved, can help us remain committed for our long-term investments. So we think that there is now time that the value add from the SIP business also comes in with the asset allocation in SIPs, which can be realized through the SIP communication. When you look at debt, this is how a normal debt discussion happens. When yields tend to come down, and yields went down to 570, there are a lot of discussions where investors, distributors would be seeking AMC views on how would the debt funds be, how is it making sense to put in money into debt. But when yields go up, look at the black lines, immediately people say that no, we do not want to get into debt anymore. Yields are going to go up, it is going to go up further, and so on. But nobody is talking about the long-term trend over the how this yields happen. How can we benefit from this long-term coming down in spite of the volatilities which we see in between the spikes up going down? Because here also by SIPU, if the investor stays invested across the cycle of the interest rate cycle, he would be able to get those benefits out of debt investing on the long term. On equity, we have solved the problem. Whenever markets dip, by SIP, by talking about it regularly, by television, by communication, by print, we have been saying that always buy in dips. Lessons learned in 2008 was that when it is dip, that was the best time to buy. Then there was a dip in 2017. There was a dip in 18, 19. It is a great time to buy. Even in 2020, last year, all of us went out and said that if you have the money and the patience, you will be able to make money. So people have experienced that. So here is the situation, what has happened, that a 15% and above drop in equity evokes attraction and attention. People say that, is this the bottom can be put in? A 15% drop in yields or a spike in yields evokes fear. So while both are talking about long term and both can deliver in long term, the single biggest reason I would say that in 2020 was that people understood that to make returns in equity, you need to stay invested. And if you stay invested, you will be able to make money. So that fear of equity has come down, primarily because people have seen immediately returns to happen. But also the lesson lost in 2020 is that even debt can give returns. Long-term debt can give returns as it is volatile. But to be able to achieve that, you need to stay invested, as you would do on the equity side. Same event, same volatility and general fear in the market. On the equity side, people will still make a phone call to buy. But today at 630, 640 or 650 or the 10-year GSEC, people will not be able to make a purchase decision because they would be looking at past returns. So here is some other data I would like to show. This is how people look at equity. Thankfully, this is just a data of as of last month of February. So naturally, the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 years are looking nice. If we were to meet in September last year, all of you know that all these data will be in single digits. But this is one of the strongest numbers which we use when we talk about showing past returns to sell future past long-term SIPs. But when we talk about debt or when it comes to asset allocation, we are ignoring some important data. And this I would like to, because we cannot ask you questions right now, if you were to guess this, look at this returns. Long-term debt 5-year returns is about 9.64%. Even liquid and liquid plus in 10 years has given about 7.5 to 8% returns in money market. Your gilt, which is considered to be very volatile and therefore people shun away from it, even that on the long term has given 8.8 to 8.9% return. Your constant maturity has given about 10%, more than 10% and 10% returns. Your medium to long term is 7.5%. So imagine we were in a situation 10 years back when we used to talk about that equity will 100% give you 15% return. If you look at this, there has hardly been any scheme which has been able to give 15% return except for small cap, but nobody is able to digest that small cap volatility. But on the debt side, if on asset allocation basis, if somebody had put in debt and stayed invested and not look at only debt as 3 months or 3 years and so on, but look at it for 15, 20 years, look at the type of returns which have been possible on the debt side. So on an asset allocation basis, rather than somebody only doing SIP for the last 4-5 years, if they had done a small amount on the other side, this would have created a lot of difference to investors, asset allocation, and all the long-term goals which you are managing. I have some examples to talk about on short-term and long-term on the debt side, which I have seen in my visits across India. We have a distributor in Jaipur whose client wants to change a phone, and they therefore have an SIP in a liquid plus, and that the investor doesn't know which scheme it is invested in. It is called as a phone wala folio, because that's where the investor knows that his short-term goals, if he keeps on investing 3,000 rupees, every 24-25 months, he will be able to change his phone. There is somebody who sells SIPs on birthdays, saying that do an SIP for your wife on your birthday. Next birthday, you do not need to take out money from equity. This SIP will take care of your birthday gifting. In teachers in a government school in Gujarat wanted to do SIP in ELSS, but they understood that every 37th month they will be only able to take out only one tranche of their money. So the distributor has been able to do their SIP into a liquid plus fund, and every January, before they need to submit their investment declaration and proofs, the money is switched from debt into ELSS. In Mumbai, we have distributors who sell SIPs in debt, where they go to children education SIPs for long term. They also give a short term SIP saying that your child is in class 3, 4, or 5, do an SIP, because from class 7th, 8th, you need to spend 4,000 to 5,000 rupees per subject for the tuition and for the products, for products which will be for their tuitions or for their coaching institutes when they want to go for higher studies, like they want to go to any engineering or any medical tuitions and so on. We have people who sell annual outflow SIPs, where all the flows which are outflows for the year, which is the school fees, which earlier used to go monthly, now it is quarterly or half yearly, school fees, PPF contribution, health insurance, life insurance, and vehicle insurance. All the amount put together is, the investor knows that this is a fixed amount for the year. So that much amount is done in SIP, and the advisor ensures that every every year, just before their insurance and their PPF becomes due, this amount is redeemed and the money is picked up, and the investments and the insurance premiums are paid. So this is some of the examples which I've learned traveling across India, where different distributors are using debt products to ensure that short-term requirements of investors are taken care of, so that they do not touch their long-term asset allocation, so that they do not get dip into their equities whenever they feel fidgety, or they create pools and money for investors which the investors themselves don't know that they need to manage going ahead. So this is how the things are, some of the examples which is being done. To now summarize and quickly end this discussion, we think that categorization and missing alpha is pushing towards new product innovation, and therefore cost of production and delivery will be debated. SIP is now a way of life. It is, people understand it, while they may not have full knowledge about it, but they know how to do it and would like to do it. So the MFDs need to quickly move to value-added SIPs, how they can convert it to asset allocation SIPs. Investors will forever seesaw between greed and fear when it comes to markets, and that's where the MFD will be able to be that sarthi, that guide who will take them through this commotion. MFD would need to micromanage their portfolios, because no other entity in the distribution space is able to customize. So that's where your strength are. We have a wonderful product which all of us believe in. There is some awareness which is growing every month, every year, about mutual funds. Yet today, if you know this number, we have 2 crore 15 lakh unique PAN numbers in the industry, while the universe today has 42 crore PAN, and this 42 crore PAN is a subset of the 130 crores population of India. The more solution and financial management we are doing, rather than just on the product side, the more will be the stickiness of investors with you, because nobody knows him better than you do. So I'll end with one of my favorite articles, which I always find, which is one of the guiding factors why we should why there is so much more to do now in this industry is because of this. I'll just pause for 5 or 10 seconds for you to have a look through this. It's very self-explanatory. It gives you an idea about the amount of universe still left for you and me to go out and get in touch with more people, because if nothing else, the number of PAN numbers in India and the number of PAN numbers available within the mutual fund space, it's only 5%. So there's a large space available. With that, I'll end my presentation. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them to the best of my abilities. But thank you so much for your support, and thank you for having us here. Thank you, IFA Galaxy team.
Thank you, Mr. Mayukh, for that wonderful talk. Thoroughly, post-lunch sessions are always more challenging, and I'm sure we had great takeaways. I'm going to come up with the first question from my end. As I listen to you, you mentioned in your talk that because of the scheme reorganization early on in your presentation, the scheme reorganization, the alpha generation is getting lesser and lesser, and as a result, the fund manager has to struggle to kind of generate that alpha. In your reckoning, what are the 2-3 factors that fund managers can look at to generate the alpha? Given that active fund managers still need to generate that alpha. Sure. What are those 2-3 things that you think will help them generate? Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, Babu sir. Thank you for having me and Mirae said on IFA Galaxy. Always a pleasure. To answer your question, what I talked about was to quickly, come to your question quickly. The idea was to say that how categorization has led to schemes being commoditized. And once that happens, how with the large cap, it has turned out that the alpha generation has reduced over the last 2 decades. And I showed 2 decades having 2 very different, distinct experiences for investors. It does not mean to say that, yes, markets have also been extraordinarily different during this last 2 decades. There have been a lot of volatility and so on. But that does not mean that alpha cannot be generated. What it also means is that for fund managers to be able to generate alpha consistently, there are, I would say, a couple of things which fund managers would always struggle with, and that's where you can differentiate between one from the other. And one would be definitely be on ideation in terms of within and this becomes little difficult on large cap, and therefore that is one thing which happens. The second part would be on what are the cost of omission. Sometimes alpha do not come in because of something which you have not been able to buy. And another is third point I would say is how to reduce your errors of commission, wherein you have bought in something and it did not turn out. Then as a fund manager, you should be able to take a call of saying that this was a bad apple. It can rot rest of the card. So get out of it and get into something else. Sometimes it becomes a little difficult when you start falling in love with your calls. So if you're able to do this couple of 2-3 things, I think if then fund managers are able to manage, I'm sure they manage many other things, but top of my mind, I would say these top 2-3 things will help ensure that there is some sort of longevity of alpha.
Thank you, Mayukh. Good points. I think very valid takeaways. Sirish Chandra here has this question: as our bond markets deepen, can we expect richer valuations due to better participation in related equity in the future? Is the question.
That's a tough one. To link debt to, but when I would take merit from that fact is one of my slides on my presentation. So I'll go back to that, where I also mentioned, I had shown that one is a 10 year to 15 years, 10-year GSEC yields of India, how it has fallen and how we missed some of that on the long-term debt allocation. I would take confidence from the fact that look at the US 10-year GSEC of 40 years, which I put up on the presentation. If their interest rates came down from around double-digit yields to almost now, where they are, and now looking into negative territory, imagine what is the impact of interest rates on equities, because we do not, in our short-term thought process of chasing fund performance or asset class performance, we forget that what is the long-term impact which interest has on an economy and on any business enterprise. All the viewers are actually businessmen, they are running their own enterprise. The impact of interest rates on a long time horizon has on consumption and has on businesses. We should always remember that when you are looking at long term stories. And if that is the possible in India, then imagine what sort of growth, what sort of pat companies would be able to show on the equity side.
Super, super. Deepti Thakkar has this question. What is AA SIP?
AA SIP was asset allocation SIP. Today in India, out of 8,100 crores of SIP book, hardly any fund house or hardly anybody, and that's the fault at the manufacturers, I would say, would never talk about that we need to do asset allocation. SIPs also. Asset allocation means is for only for the people who already have money. People who don't have money have to create assets, therefore have to buy equities, which is something which is time that we should debunk that theory and say that we should think about that if in long term equity is good and then in long term debt is also good. If we can do an SIP on the equity side for earnings and the chart which I showed on the returns, I was baffled when I said that 10-year liquid fund return is 7.56%. Imagine from an asset allocation point of view what it would have made sense if I had some SIP on the liquid or if I had on a 10-year constant maturity product. So that's asset allocation SIP out of, again, to complete 8,100 crores of SIP book in India today. I would say not even 10 or 12% of that is on the debt side. Good time that we change that.
I do hope the manufacturers all are listening to this, and hopefully we will
We
have.
are pushing for it with some limited say. And I would say just to complete that point, I am not saying that this is any brainwave from the manufacturing side. I have given examples of the cities I visit, and these are the learnings I get from the advisors that how they are putting up small asset allocation, taking care of expenses, savings to talk about the equity SIPs. Because first they are saying that let me take care of your worries, of your short-term problems, then you will stay committed for your long-term solutions.
Sure. Thank you, Mayank. Chandaluri Nage has this question. For the coming 2 years, are you very bullish on the mid-cap doing well, given that relative valuation seems to be in favor of mid and small cap as compared to large cap at this point in time? So what's your thought?
I think our fund house view would be that we are looking at some revival. So we always said that things will revert to mean. So for so many years, for almost 3-4 years, the mid cap was not doing so great. It is catching up right now. The earnings, some of that is coming back. Having said that, it is not, unfortunately, what happens in India, it becomes an either or situation. It's not an either or situation. In the last 10 years, I would say the large have also become larger. It's not that the large cap story is over in India. We are not in the camp which says that India will start growing, but only from the 101st company. India will continue to grow from the number one company if it has to grow. So this theory that only this will work and therefore we are in maximization, please understand and the fact that mid caps give you returns. But once those months to stay invested for those years, it will take you a lot of years to be patient enough. If your investor is of that thought process, then allocate. If not, you have your multi-caps and others, which will ensure that there is this much allocation so that your investor gets a stable, a little predictable journey. If not, if you know somebody who can really take on the churning and the tsunamis which will come on mid-cap, go ahead with that. That's the beauty about going to an advisor, because he knows what the investor may be saying something, but he knows how to interpret beyond what he's saying.
Absolutely. So we have the next question from Mr. Phoenix Subramaniam. Without worrying on current volatility, is it wiser to continue already given the corporate debt SIP as a long-term goals?
Yes.
So should somebody really going to go for a change? And what is your general view on a debt fund SIP? I mean, is it something that must be must in everybody's books? That's a question from Rahul Goel. So I thought I'll combine both of them.
Sure. So I'll quickly answer I think the corporate bond category and the bank PSU category will slowly become the core portfolio on the debt side on the longer duration. Because on the longer term, people would expect a certain asset quality to be maintained on their debt side. I am 40 years old. If I'm holding debt for 50 years, I would like to get into something which is predominantly the large cap on the debt side and not take any hiccups. So that could become on the retail side look like that. So I would say that yes, there is merit in what Felix sir is doing. It makes sense that, and the bank PSU will give them a certain assurance that the quality will not go down. There may be some hiccups there and there. So that's his part. Rahul's answer, and that's something which I'm very passionate about. There is something which is on the debt SIP which answers, which the equity doesn't. And there are two parts to it. Life is also, from an investor's point of view, a lot about short-term goals. I may need to retire once. I would need to take care of my child's education once. I need to take care of a house and a car once or twice, a car twice, thrice in a life. But I need to take care of my PPF, my medical insurance, my life insurance, my school fees, my phone changing every 3 years, every year. My short-term goals are something which we have tend to say that, oh, it's a 5 paisa thing. Why get into it? Too much of hassle to explain to him. I have come here to solve your long-term plans, long-term problems. The investor is actually thinking, let me survive my short-term problems. Then I'll talk about long-term problems. That's where the debt SIP comes in. The equity SIP will not help me solve a goal which is going to happen, for which I need to accumulate money in the next 2 years, 3 years, if that goal is coming in, or in the next 6 months. Equity SIP helps me solve my long-term problems, which will happen in the next 5 or 10 years. So there also debt will help me. The long-term problem will be helped by debt and equity by asset allocation, but the short-term goals will be answered by the debt SIPs. That's where equity doesn't come in. So the debt SIP can answer both sides, the short-term goals and on the asset allocation on the long-term goals, while on long-term, equity cannot answer on both buckets. It can answer one bucket.
Thank you so much, Mayukh, for those wonderful words. I think my great takeaway in this is that debt SIP is an extremely important part of giving solutions to customers, especially for their short-term goals, and that's a great value addition that you have placed before us. Unfortunately, we have run right out of time. There are a few more questions, but I am unable to kind of continue because we have another session after this. But thank you so much, Mayukh, so much of wisdom and coming to us on a Saturday afternoon. Wonderful. Thank you, and have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, Babu sir. Thank you, everyone at IFA Galaxy. Wish you all the best. Stay well and be healthy. Thank you. Thank you for your time and for having us.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Mayukh Datta. That was really very insightful. It gives a lot of confidence and hope as MFDs that we are in this business for long haul, and this business we are going to reap together. We are all going to grow. Thanks for that wonderful presentation, Mr. Mayukh Datta.